Hey everybody, I am Surbhi and you are watching Key Differences. In this video, we will talk about the differences between contract and agreement. So friends, without further ado, let's get started. Now before diving to our main topic of discussion, first of all we will understand the basic concept. So what is contract? So contract is a written or spoken agreement between the parties that creates mutual legal obligation. So it has two main components, that is agreement and legal enforceability. Now first of all we will go through agreement. An agreement is a negotiated arrangement between parties as to a course of action. It is when two parties show their mutual acceptance or approval to each other on a particular matter. Therefore, in an agreement, one party makes an offer to another party who in turn accepts it. Hence, we could say that offer and acceptance makes a promise. When this promise and set of promises forms a consideration for both the parties concerned, it is called as an agreement. Now we will understand this with an example. Suppose Mr. Joe makes an offer to Miss Ria to buy his car for rupees 10 lakh and Miss Ria accepts that offer. So the proposal made by Mr. Joe amounts to an offer, and when Miss Ria gives her assent, it amounts to acceptance. So Miss Ria will get car as a consideration, whereas Mr. Joe will get money as consideration. In short, this scenario explains the concept of agreement. Now coming back to our topic of discussion, moving on to enforceability by law. So there are certain points which you need to keep in mind. That is, a contract will be legally enforceable only when the consent of the parties is free. That is, it is not influenced by coercion, undue influence, fraud or misrepresentation. The parties must be competent to contract. That is, the parties should be of sound mind and they should have attained the age of 18 years at the time of entering into a contract. Next, the consideration and object of the contract should be lawful. That is, the purpose for which the contract is created as well as the consideration which the parties are going to get should not be illegal or forbidden by law. Lastly, the contract should not be expressly declared void. We will understand this with an example. Suppose an adult agrees to not enter into a marriage in exchange for money. Such a contract is expressly declared void. Similarly, contract and restraint of trade are also declared void. So what we have understood is every contract is an agreement, but not every agreement is a contract. This is because a contract always contains the element of agreement, but an agreement does not always contains the elements of contract. Hence, if an agreement is capable of creating legal obligation, it results in a contract, but when it fails to create legal obligation, it is only an agreement and not a contract. Moving on to agreement. An agreement is an outcome of consenting minds. It is the stepping stone of a contract that results from offer and acceptance. So, an agreement comes into existence when one party makes a proposal or offer to another party and that party gives his approval to it. Here you must note that offer alone has no legal consequence unless it is accepted. On the acceptance of the offer, it is converted into binding promise. The party making an offer is the promiser and the party accepting that offer is the promisee. Suppose Mr. A makes an offer to Mr. B and Mr. B accepts that offer. So it will constitute a promise between them. Here Mr. A will act as a promiser and Mr. B will be the promisee. Also, you should keep in mind that such a promise should form consideration for both the parties to be called as an agreement. Now, after analyzing this definition, we come across two major characteristics of agreement. These are plurality of persons and consensus ad idem. Now we will discuss them one by one. Plurality of persons means that there must be at least two persons to make an agreement, because one person cannot enter into an agreement with himself. Consensus ad idem, which means consent to the matter. So, both the parties must agree on the subject matter in the same sense at the same time. For example, Mr. A has two cars, blue and red. He makes an offer to Mr. B to buy his car for rupees 5 lakh. And Mr. B agrees to it thinking that Mr. A has only one car, that is the blue one. So, there will be no contract in this case because there is no consensus ad idem. Moving on to contract. A contract is an exchange of promises between two or more parties that creates an obligation either to perform a particular act or not perform a particular act. So, A contract is an agreement whose object is to create legal obligation, that is, a duty enforceable by law. This obligation is recognized and enforced by law. Here you should take a note that when a legal obligation is created, it gives a right to one party and casts a corresponding duty on another party. And because of the existence of rights and obligations, the law also provides remedies for the breach of the contract and acknowledges its due performance in the form of duty. In short, a contract is a binding agreement which creates and defines obligations for the parties and which is enforceable by law. Further, these rights and obligations must be of such a nature that these can be claimed in the court of law. So here we come across three major components of a contract, that is agreement, obligation and enforceability by law. Now I am going to give you some real life examples to understand contract. So when you purchase groceries, you enter into a contract with the shopkeeper, or when you ride a taxi to reach home, you enter into a contract with the taxi service company. Moving on to the difference between agreement and contract. Meaning, when two or more persons come together and one makes proposal to another who in turn accepts that proposal, then it results in an agreement forming consideration for each other. On the other hand, a contract refers to such an agreement which is capable of being enforced in the court of law. This means that both the parties has the right to sue each other in the case of non-performance of the contract. Next, while an agreement is defined under Section 2, subsection E of the Indian Contract Act 1872, contract is defined under Section 2, subsection H of the Indian Contract Act 1872. Next, the two main elements of the agreement are offer and acceptance of the offer by the same person to whom the offer is being made. As against, the two main elements of the contract are agreement and its enforceability in the court of law. Next, agreement is not necessarily in writing, that is, it is oral or implied too. In contrast, a contract is normally written and registered, but there can be contracts which can be oral or implied. However, there are also certain special cases in which a contract is considered valid only if it is in writing and registered, such as arbitration agreement, agreement for the sale of immovable property, etc. Next, legal obligation. While an agreement does not create legal obligation, a contract creates legal obligation. One should note that at the time of entering into the contract, there has to be an intention between the parties that the agreement may result in legal consequences and may give rise to legal obligations. And so, agreements of social or domestic nature do not result in legal relation, and so they are not considered as contract. Next, because all the contracts are agreement too, as they contains the basic elements of an agreement, the scope of an agreement is comparatively wider than a contract, whereas every agreement is not a contract because not all of them have legally binding tendency. So, the scope of a contract is narrow. Next, breach. Breach of an agreement by any party may not result in legal consequences, whereas breach of a contract may attract legal consequences because it is legally binding in nature. So friends, this brings me to the end of this lesson. I hope the concepts has been clear now. However, if you want to study the topic further in detail, you can visit our official website, that is keyreferences.com. Here you can find a detailed comparison of contract and agreement along with their definitions and examples. Links are also provided in the description box below. I hope you liked this video, and if you did, please do give it a thumbs up and share it with other people. Also, if you are new to this channel and wanna get more such useful videos, consider subscribing this channel and also hit the notification bell next to the subscribe button so that you are notified every time whenever a new video is uploaded on this channel. And if you have any queries or feedback for me, feel free to leave in the comment section below. Until next time, this is me Surbi signing off.